Before anything else, I just want to say thank you to the organisers for tonight. Thank you to Ross, Jordan and Heidi and anyone else that played a part in organising this event. And also thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk. So, good afternoon everybody, my name is Brad. I've been volunteering with Anonymous for the Voiceless for a little over a year now. My first Cube of Truth was a freezing cold Saturday afternoon in Covent Garden in London, early December last year. And I was in the Cube for the entire duration of the demonstration because I had no idea how to initiate a conversation with a stranger about veganism. And now today I'm the assistant director of the organisation. So how did that happen? Well, rewind 2.5 years ago, I was eating animals. My spare time would be spent playing video games and getting drunk at the football. I had a season ticket at Watford. My idea of a vegan was someone that only ate fruit once it had fallen from the tree naturally. That was what vegan meant to me. And then in late November 2015, I was exposed to some slaughterhouse footage on YouTube. This was after a content creator on YouTube called the Hodge Twins shared a video about this. And I watched the video, and I'd seen it before, but I chose to look away, chose to close the window. This time I watched it, and it was pigs, and what I saw did not sit well with me. So I started doing some research. Do we need to eat animals? Quickly found no. In fact, it's detrimental to our health. So I thought maybe I'll become pescatarian. Then I see a suggested video about fish farming, and that was the end of that. Then I watched a couple more suggested videos, dairy, eggs, environment. And I quickly realised that veganism was the logical choice, the only choice, especially as I considered myself an animal lover. So I missed my first Watford home game in about 4 years, which was a big deal for me, to attend the Animal Rights March in London in October 2016. And I'd never felt so empowered. The next demonstration I went to was the first Cube of Truth in the UK, the first in London, and I just threw myself into it. Not long after that, I was appointed the co-organiser of the London chapter alongside George Martin. And then I just got more and more involved, started doing admin work for AV, responding to messages from the page, things like this, alongside travelling around the country to new chapters, supporting them on their first demonstration. I went to Birmingham, Kent, Chelmsford, Brighton, Oxford, to name a few. And then I spent my birthday weekend in Berlin. This is back in August, and I went to a Cube there on my birthday. And after that, I went for a few drinks with Paul and Asal. Now, Paul and Asal are the co-founders of AV, and that evening they offered me the title or the role of assistant director, which is something that is truly an honour and a privilege for me to be involved with. So, I think this has happened. Could you raise your hand for me if you have attended a Cube of Truth? Okay, hands down, most of the room, fantastic. Now for those of you who haven't attended a Cube or maybe don't know so much about AV, allow me to give you a brief introduction to the organisation. So established in April 2016 in Melbourne, Australia by Paul Bashir and Asal Alamdari, Anonymous for the Voiceless is an animal rights organisation specialising in street activism. We hold an abolitionist stance on animal exploitation, and we host a highly effective and highly structured demonstration around the world called the Cube of Truth. Now, the Cube of Truth, it's a peaceful, static demonstration akin to an art performance. It is not a protest. And since we started in April 2016, as of today, we now have 340, roughly, groups, or as we call them, chapters around the world. That's spread out across 6 continents. And this is roughly up to date. Over 1,700 Cube of Truth demonstrations, we have convinced a conservative number of 57,000 people to take the needless violence in their diet and lifestyle seriously. Now, I'm just going to go over a few kind of house rules for how these demonstrations operate. So we have the Cube, and the outreach. The cube team, they stand in a cube formation, masked, wearing masks, holding laptops or signs. But before I explain that, there's two more things I wanted to say about the organisation. We chose to use the masks, the Guy Fawkes, the V for Vendetta masks, because they're a symbol for fighting against injustices the world over. Some parts of the Anonymous movement will fight for human rights. Some will fight against governmental corruption, corporate greed, tax avoidance. Anonymous for the Voiceless is the animal rights sub-branch of this movement. And it is our opinion that animal exploitation, animal agriculture are the greatest injustices happening today. Now, what sets the Cube of Truth apart from other outreach events, other demonstrations, is the strict focus on being structured, professional, and being organised. And part of the inspiration for this focus on being organised comes from a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. And that quote goes, "Those who love peace must learn to organise as effectively as those who love war." So now I'm just going to go over the basic house rules of how the demonstration operates. As I said, we've got cube and outreach. Sorry. The cube team, as I said, stand in a cube formation, wearing the masks, holding truth signs or laptops showing local slaughterhouse farm footage. And then the outreach team will engage in conversation with the bystanders that stop and take an interest. Now, there's two things that everybody at these demonstrations needs to be aware of. First of all, we wear black. Reason for that is simply to have a level of uniformity amongst the group. And then secondly, and most importantly, the Cube of Truth is not a social event. It's not a social gathering, and it's to be taken seriously by all the volunteers. So if you're on outreach, the first thing to get across is that we're there to promote a clear vegan message and nothing less. We're not there to promote meat-free Mondays or vegetarianism or pescatarianism. We need to make veganism the absolute minimum, because if people that we speak to want to do less than that, they're going to do less, but it should not be because we encourage them to do so. We need to ensure that the people we speak to understand why vegetarianism, pescatarianism, they're not even close to being enough. Second, responsibility of those on outreach is to maintain the aesthetics or the welfare of the cube. When I say welfare, if someone in the cube has their hand raised, then an outreacher would approach them and sort them out. And when I say aesthetics, if someone in the cube is holding their sign a little lopsided, or if someone in the cube needs to stand a little bit to the right to tighten things up, someone on outreach should instruct them to do so. This is because those on outreach can see how good the cube looks a lot better than those within. Now, outreach literature that's used is provided by the organisers in the form of little AV business cards that we have. This is the only literature that we hand out at the events, and we hand them out sparingly. There's only two scenarios where we would hand out a card. That's A, if someone asks for one, and B, if we're having a productive conversation, we feel like they'd use the information, then we would offer it to them. Again, we use them sparingly. Another really important aspect on outreach, and this is unique to the Cube of Truth. I mentioned a number of 57,000 people. The way we track that is everybody on outreach at the Cube of Truth is keeping their own personal tally of how many people they genuinely feel are going to go home that they've spoken to, are genuinely going to go home and take this issue seriously. Now, what we use to gauge people's sincerity and if they're being genuine, it's not necessarily what they say, because you could have a 5-10 minute chat with someone, they'll take a card and say, yeah, I'll look into it. That's not convincing. What we look for is their body language, their reaction to the footage. Are they upset or shocked? Their reaction to the conversation, do they seem engaged? Are they asking lots of questions? Those are the sorts of things we look for as to whether we would consider it a conversion. Again, not using the word conversion literally, but that's the term we use for keeping the tallies going. And then finally on outreach, we don't encourage bystanders to come and watch the videos. We don't say, come and watch this. We let people approach us out of their own choice, their own intrigue, their own curiosity. That's our way of pre-qualifying the public to see who has an open mind about this and who wants to talk. because we don't want to waste our time with unreachable people. So that's outreach, and then a few basic house rules for the cube. The cube is the focal point of the demonstration. That's what's going to draw people towards us so we can have a conversation. So this is why we really focus on aesthetics here. So if you're in the cube, we need you to be stood very still, straight, facing forward, very robotic. If you're holding a device in the cube and someone is obviously watching your device, then we would extend our arms just slightly to get the footage closer to them. And then once they've walked off or the conversation's finished, we would retract it back. Again, very robotic. Now there's two scenarios where those in the cube would raise their hand, and this is how those in the cube communicate with the outreach team. And those two scenarios are A, for a break, and B, if someone in the cube sees a child on their own watching the videos. When we say child, we mean someone who's obviously under the age of 12. Not easy to guess the ages these days. What would happen in that situation is the cube would raise their hand to alert someone on outreach, and then that person would talk to the child, ask if their parent or carer are around. And if they are, they would speak to that parent or carer just to ask if they're happy for the child to watch the videos. Now, we don't have that protocol in place because we feel that children should be hidden from the truth, not at all. We have that in place to be professional and to be respectful in that sort of situation. And then also in the cube, if for those with the devices, we just ask that the brightness is maximized, the sound is turned off, and any Wi-Fi is disabled. That's just to save battery. So they're the basic kind of house rules for each element. And what I'm going to mention next are some things that we have added as rules or protocols as we go along. Things that we've noticed have had either a positive or a negative impact, and then we've implemented a protocol based around that. So the first one, I'll mention 4. The first one is attitude on outreach. Now, we're going to have frustrating conversations. We're going to have people talk to us about bacon, and we're going to be told plants have feelings. But it's so imperative that everybody on outreach keeps their cool, remains calm, polite, respectful, and empathetic. Not only because if we react aggressively, that person's defenses are going to shut down and we will never get through to them. But also, not only are we there to educate people on the streets, with the whole professionalism idea, we're there to change this idea that people have of vegans. A lot of people think we're aggressive and rude and preachy and all of this. And if someone walks past a cube and sees the vegans getting angry and aggressive, it's just going to perpetuate that idea. Oh, crazy vegans again. Whereas if we're the ones keeping calm, collected, at the very least, it's going to help to change that stigma. So that's really important for us. And the majority of cubes I've been to, there's never been an issue. The next one I'll mention is chalking. Now, we don't permit chalking to be used at the cube, and we first noticed this at the 3rd cube in London, or we noticed what negative impacts it was having. First of all, what happened was someone was chalking around the perimeter of the cube, and straight away we noticed it was creating a gap between the cube and the bystanders because the bystanders did not want to stand on the chalk, therefore they couldn't get so close to the footage. So that was the first thing. And then also, from afar, the cube is subtle. It's not so obvious what we're there for. You'll see the masks, you'll see the signs that read truth, but what truth? That's why people get curious and approach us. And if someone's walking down the street and they see the cube and they look at the ground and see, go vegan, stop eating animals, they're going to put 2 and 2 together and work out what the cube's about. And because in general people don't want to see this footage we're showing, more likely to avoid us. When people avoid us, we can't start a conversation with them. Next thing is leafleting. Now, it's similar to the idea of why we've banned essentially chalking. 2 reasons again. If we're handing out leaflets willy-nilly to passers-by and we give a leaflet to someone who showed no interest, where's that leaflet going to end up? More than likely in the bin. So it can be a waste of resources. This is why I say about being sparing with the leaflets we're handing out. Oh, sorry, the cards. And then another reason, again, we like to put ourselves in the shoes of the bystander. Imagine you're walking down the street and you see a group of people, they're all holding a big wad of leaflets. Now, regardless of what that material is about, in general, people don't want to be hassled, they don't want to be bothered whilst they're walking around doing their shopping. So if someone sees a big group of leafleters, again, more likely to avoid us. And then the final thing I'll mention is about audio. Now, if there's a speaker present at the demonstration, we'll use that to play music. And the music that we play is emotional, sad, solemn and thought-provoking, because that's the sort of atmosphere or ambience we want to generate around the cube. We don't play the sounds of the videos we're showing. The sounds from these videos, it's either going to be graphic animal sounds or narration. For example, Ed with Land of Hope and Glory. Now, we don't need Ed narrating for us because that's the job of those on outreach, to explain and talk to the bystander about what's happening in the video. We don't want the graphic animal sounds. A, that's unpleasant for the volunteers to listen to for 2, 3, 4 hours. But also, again, walking down the street and you hear pigs screaming because they're being gassed to death, are you going to be drawn to that? Or you're going to want to avoid it, aren't you? That's what we found, and that's why we chose to turn the laptops and the devices to mute, regardless of whether we have a speaker for music or not. So the final thing I'll say, we want people to attend these demonstrations. We want people to enjoy doing so. And for the most part, people do. And a lot of that enjoyment comes from the feeling like they're making a difference by attending, and they are. And we also encourage social events after a Cube of Truth, like a team meal, just to, again, further the enjoyment of the day, wind down and chill out and make some connections. But what I will say is the things we don't want, we need the volunteers to take these demonstrations seriously. We don't want people in the cube checking their phones or having a conversation with each other. For me, if the cube itself is looking tight, compact, aesthetically pleasing, then that sets the scene for a positive and a productive demonstration all round. Whereas if you've got, let's imagine we had a cube of 8, 2 on each side. One side, they're checking their phones. The other side, they're having a conversation with each other. And then the 2 other sides, they're stood slouched, looking like they don't want to be there. That just sets, again, a negative atmosphere around the place. We need the volunteers to take these demonstrations seriously, and only then will the public take us and the message seriously. Thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions about AV, about the cube, please feel free. Yes, sir.
What about unofficial cubes? There's 1 or 2 sort of taking place now in different areas and whatever.
Where are they?
One in Mansfield.
Okay.
And I don't know, there's a couple others somewhere else. I don't know those places.
Obviously, we want as many demonstrations taking place because we all have the same goal. Now, I never understand, I know unofficial cubes do take place, and I'll never understand why, because it's beneficial to officially partner with the organisation for all involved. We offer support, advice, and it's just beneficial for all round. The part that I have the most issue with that is, A, it's a little bit disrespectful, certainly using the Anonymous for the Voiceless name, because of course we can't stop people operating demonstrations in a similar way to us. How it works is when someone wants to set up an official chapter, they'll contact us on social media, we'll send them a manual, so Ross went through this process, and then we'll arrange an induction call. Now, I started taking these a few months ago, and Ross was actually only my 2nd call, so it's probably a really rusty one, sorry mate. So that's kind of, again, professional and officiating it in that way. And if someone is operating a Cube of Truth demonstration without the proper induction process, there's a high chance they're operating it in a way that's not how we do it. And that, for me, is misrepresenting the organisation. As I say, these inductions, we talk about this stuff, about why we have these certain protocols, because we've seen that they're effective. But again, if people are on the streets, helping animals in any way, go for it. But I would encourage anyone thinking of setting up one to officiate it, because, as I say, it's beneficial all round.
This wasn't the they're not actually anything to do with the cube at all. They're animal rights activists that just wanted to do something a little bit different.
Sure.
They
Yeah. No, I absolutely understand that. Any others? Nope. Okay, well, thank you so much.